So, listen to this. Imagine you're playing the biggest final of your life. Your country's first title since the 1970s is on the line, and if you needed a reminder of how important penalties can be in tournaments in the semi-finals, despite your opponents only getting a single shot on target, you only make it through on a penalty shootout. Surely you'd spend the next 4 days studying the keeper you're about to face, right? Especially if he happened to be a guy who's literally known for being a terrible shot stopper who's only saved 5 penalties in his whole life. Right? I mean, it's simple. The only meaningful penalty he ever saved in his life was a Panenka. Everyone knows he never dives. You just have to pick a side and make sure you don't repeat Agüero's mistake. Yeah, no wonder people think this guy missed on purpose. But regardless, a lot of things were wrong with his tournament way before the final. Don't get me wrong, the final deserved an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. But the tournament as a whole deserved to outright win a Golden Globe for Best Live Drama. Listen, the whole thing hadn't even started and Cameroon had already taken a spotlight. As it turns out that since risking a 3-year ban by signing a sponsorship deal with a betting house and drop-kicking a journalist at the last World Cup, Samuel Eto'o, who, for those who don't know, has been the Cameroonian Football Federation's president for about 5 years at this point, has now been accused of match-fixing, abuse of power, inciting violence, physical threats and spreading false information, and still managed to get re-elected with 97% of the votes, finally allowing him to go against his own sports ministry and sack their manager Marc Brice, who he hates. The thing is, Marc Brice never really got the news, like, literally. No one ever told him he was fired. They just hired a new manager and started pretending it doesn't exist. All of this 23 days before the opening game, meaning no preparation matches, no training sessions, just vibes. Which obviously became even more of a problem when newly appointed manager Pagu and Samuel Eto'o announced the squad for the tournament and left out everyone you know. Probably. No Andre Onana, no Abubakar, no Choupo-Moting. And though Mbumu made the cut, this was controversial enough that Marc Brice decided to start his own civil war by gathering support from all the rejects, publishing his own squad list with all the big names on it, and then publicly stating that Eto'o was a narcissist crook who only left those players out because he was afraid Abubakar would break his goal-scoring record. Though, hilariously, as drastic as that all sounds, then Eto'o kind of just ignored them, and that's it. End of story. However, in the meantime, the tournament started and, of course, there, almost everything went wrong. From muddy parking lots swallowing whole cars into sinkholes, to overcrowding at the turnstiles almost leading to a crush, even though the stadiums were half empty. And, of course, the lack of public transportation leading taxi drivers to extort tourists by tripling their prices overnight, which is actually okay because, after all, FIFA loves extortion. They just call it dynamic pricing. Regardless, the organization or lack thereof was far from the highlight. The second the tournament got going, the South African manager went for the 3-for-1 special and managed to be accused of being racist, sexist, and insulting the hosts, all in the same press conference. Then, a couple weeks later, Gabon, who had already lost their first 2 games, went in front 2-0 in their third, only to collapse and lose 3-2, getting their own government to come live on TV to deem their performances disgraceful, actually suspending their own national team, and hilariously going as far as suspending Aubameyang, their all-time leading goal scorer, and Manga, their most capped player ever, despite the fact that neither of them had even played in that third game. Meaning 12 days later, they had already realized how insane it all was and reinstated everyone. But the chaos wouldn't stop there. Because, obviously, once we got to the semi-finals, almost like clockwork, there was still one thing that was missing from the tournament: Sadio Mané, versus Mo Salah. And of course, despite Salah's best efforts rising up from a period of poor form to score as many goals in the African Cup of Nations as he had in the first half of the Premier League season, just like every other time, Mane not only defeated him, he scored the winning goal himself. His own former teammate has been torturing him for 11 years now. Yet, for some reason, it was Egypt's manager Osama Hassan that lost his mind, first holding up 7 fingers to the Senegal fans to signify Egypt's 7 AFCON titles, then insisting other teams were just jealous of their success, all after being knocked out in a match where his team only had 1 shot on target. And right before losing a 3rd place playoff, where his team would also only have 1 shot on target. I don't think anyone is too jealous of that. However, that finally brings us to the other semi-final where Morocco defeated Nigeria on penalties and where the main point of discussion was the refereeing, which was questionable at times, but I'll say it, not as bad as it was in pretty much every other game Morocco played. The whole tournament there were claims that Morocco were trying to steal the title, bribing referees the whole 9 yards. So let's take a look. First match, sure, Morocco did get a penalty in their favor, but it looked alright to me and they did miss it, so it didn't matter much. In the second game, however, they got another penalty from this weird handball. Personally, I feel like the movement of his hand is natural, and it's very obvious Gassama didn't even intend to hit it with his hand, since he didn't gain anything from it, and was still dribbled past by Brahim Diaz. Regardless, the referee checked VAR, gave it, and Diaz converted it. The thing is, there were 2 more penalty situations in that match. One that was given and allowed Mali to tie the match, but god damn it was obvious. There was no way to go around that one. But there was another for which the referee didn't even bother to check the VAR yet again. And was it very in your face? No, but Amrabat definitely steps on him when he's no longer in possession. Seems like the kind of thing VAR would give. One way or another, it was the second incident in a game that ended in a 1-goal draw. Who knows how much different it could have been. No matter what then, in the 3rd game there wasn't much to it. But in the round of 16, it started getting rough. 94th minute, 1-0 to Morocco. A player goes down in the box, there's a clear hand pushing his shoulder, but not even a VAR check. Don't get me wrong, I know you'll argue that he was already losing his footing when the hand was placed on his shoulder, but it is arguable, and the fact there was no VAR check is odd. And by the quarters, they were already leading 1-0 when Mbeumo got sideswiped and tripped onto the ground. I've seen a few people argue this one wasn't a penalty, but for me, this one is clear. I'd give it every single time, but guess what? Not even a VAR check. So after the usual Bono heroics in the shootout, the final was set. Senegal versus Morocco. Sure, Morocco had reached the semi-finals of the World Cup 4 years earlier, something no African team had ever achieved. But in the AFCON, they had underperformed for the longest time. That semi-final was their first since 2004. Back when their coach Regragui was still only their right back and their captain Hakimi was just a 5-year-old. They had not won the tournament since 1976, and now, while allegations went around that they were abusing their power as hosts to sway the tournament in their favor, they had to beat the defending champions in order to get to the title. So, what did they do? Well, they surely did not take long before getting into some controversy. First, Senegal complained that only 3,000 tickets were allotted to their fans, even though the stadium had capacity for 70,000. Then, the organization put their squad in trouble by making them cross a train station in the middle of the fence with nowhere near enough security. And, of course, just a day before the final, 3 Senegalese players went down sick, with reports of food poisoning, which is interesting given that Morocco had already been accused of that same thing in 2018 by Gabon and 2021 by Guinea-Bissau. But hey, reasonable doubt, right? After all, in the day of the game, things went down pretty well. Or at least they did, until the 92nd minute. Then Senegal scored and the referee blew his whistle immediately before the ball even went in, not just disallowing the goal, but making sure there couldn't even be a VAR check. Though anyone who saw the replay could at the very least see that it was questionable. So after that, the game was a ticking time bomb. and it only took 3 minutes before it blew up. There was a corner and among the mess, Brahim Diaz went down in the box, and though there is no chance that you've put enough force on his shoulder to bring him down, I mean, Brahim Diaz himself carried on playing, only deciding to call for the referee once his cross went into the stands. After 3 minutes of being hounded by the Moroccan players, the referee went to the VAR and gave the penalty. Immediately, chaos erupted, chairs flying off the stands, fans confronting the riot police, even journalists were getting into fights with each other. And before you knew it, the Senegalese players had left the pitch in protest. Except for Mané. Not only did he stay behind, but then he went into the locker room and convinced his players to come back, saving the final from the most miserable ending in the history of international football. And, of course, getting rewarded for that. As I said, Brahim Diaz embarrassingly went for the Panenka against the one keeper who apparently can only save Panenkas. It was so unexpected that confetti went off in the Moroccan fan zone. This guy had even the commentators and big-time journalists debating whether there was a chance he had wasted it on purpose in some weird act of fair play, with everyone questioning why the Senegalese players had not celebrated the miss. Insisting that surely the two teams had gotten into some kind of agreement, and that was the way Mané convinced his teammates to come back. But, as exciting and interesting as that all sounds, I hate to break it to you, I don't think that was the case. More often than not, the simplest answer is the right one. And let me tell you, Brahim Diaz just succumbed to the pressure. Look, there's a bunch of factors. While the fight was going off, the youth was spotted scuffing up the penalty spot. Meanwhile, Mendy and Mané were all over Brahim Diaz, putting as much pressure on him as they could. Mendy even interrupted his first run-up by coming off his line to talk to the referee. There were some serious Emi Martinez kind of tactics going on there, and the most important of all, Brahim Diaz had done this before. At 16 years old, while still representing Spain at the Under-17 Euros final, he hit the Panenka as well. And that time it went okay, so he must have thought to himself, why not do it again? Remember, as paradoxical as it may sound, it is a common coping mechanism to try to aura farm while under pressure. It's like a way to overcompensate and convince yourself you're not under pressure. It's just that the gamble didn't pay off this time. Oh, and by the way, don't come at me saying that Mendy was off his line. That video is deceiving. In a proper frame, you can clearly see he was on. However, just imagine if the referee asked for a retake. Yeah. With the game going into extra time, since after all, it wasn't over yet, now the substitute keeper had to stand guard of Mendy's towels right beside the goalpost, as the ball boys kept trying to steal it. I mean, come on, where's Eden Hazard when you need him? And you know what? Yes, the ball boys were disgraceful. At one point they literally dragged the backup goalkeeper through the ground, but the biggest question is, how come Hakimi thought it was okay to do that himself? How can it be that the substitutes that were warming up kept asking the ball boys to do it? You're a professional footballer, behave like one. But you may be asking, why steal a towel? Well, the obvious thing is that it was raining and towels help the goalkeepers keep their gloves dry. But there's also the juju or black magic side of things. It happened in 2012 in a match in Kenya precisely because of a towel. In 2000, in the AFCON quarterfinals, a Nigerian official ran into the pitch to remove a charm from Senegal's goal. In the semi-finals of 2002, the Cameroonian staff were also caught placing a charm on the pitch. And in the 2015 final, Andrew Ayew was seen sprinkling a powder all over while he warmed up. Regardless, it did not save Morocco, as Papke scored an absolute screamer just 4 minutes into extra time, unbelievably taking the trophy to Senegal after they had, quite literally, forfeited the match. So, obviously, the Moroccans did not like that. Suddenly, you had the two managers clashing on the pitch. Brahim Diaz walked straight down the tunnel in tears, before coming back to receive his golden boot with a kind of 1,000-yard stare you only find in war veterans. And meanwhile, the Moroccan prince was supposed to deliver the trophy to the winners, you know, being the host of the tournament and all. Well, he just refused to. which became even more ironic once the CAF decided to hand Morocco the tournament's Fair Play Award. Yeah, sure, such fair play that the post-match interview had to be cancelled, with journalists calling for Regragui to resign, blaming him for the children crying in the stands, while Malik Thiaw, the Senegalese manager, had to walk out the room and cancel his own interview, as a fight broke out between the Senegalese journalists who applauded him and the Moroccan journalists who booed him. And that was all inside the stadium. Outside, there were riots with supporters actually getting seriously hurt. There are even reports of police officers at the airport causing trouble to fans who just wanted to leave the country. Even a member of Congress asked for the referee to be jailed and accused the Senegalese of retreating to the locker room to take part in some black magic ritual. I am not joking. But well, at least the Algerians were happy. As for how this will end, well, it seems the Moroccans will take legal action against both CAF and FIFA. FIFA themselves are considering banning the Senegalese players who left the pitch for 4 to 6 matches, which would ruin their World Cup in the summer. But somehow no one seems to care about Morocco or the ballboys. Are these guys really gonna host a World Cup in 2030? After all of this? Well, I mean, if the USA can do it with all that's happening there, why not them? Oh, and one last thing. Nicholas Jackson now has more AFCONs than Mohamed Salah.